She smiled so the world wouldn't ask questions. But behind that smile was a war quiet, constant, and fought not in boardrooms, but at the dinner table, where love once lived. The rain pressed against the window pane in soft, rhythmic taps, each droplet carving a path through the foggy glass like a tear refusing to stay still. Mira Ellison, 26, sat curled on the ledge of her apartment window, her arms wrapped loosely around her legs. Outside, Graybridge lay hidden beneath the low-hanging clouds, but her eyes weren't really watching the city. She was looking somewhere much further away. To the world, Mira was sharp, witty, slightly rebellious. The kind of woman who made clever comebacks, wore mismatched socks on purpose, and always seemed in control. But behind her lightheartedness lived something much heavier. The truth, she hadn't felt like she belonged anywhere since she was 10. That was the year everything changed. Her mother, soft-voiced and sun-hearted, passed away after a short illness. From that moment on, the warmth in Mira's world vanished. Her father, Leonard Ellison, a well-known business figure, buried himself in work, and 3 years later, he remarried. Celeste Ellison arrived in their home with cold elegance and a polished smile. Mira, just 13 at the time, with some knew within minutes this woman did not love her. Celeste never shouted. She didn't need to. Why don't you spend more time with your friends, Mira? Leonard works so hard you wouldn't want to bother him, would you? That outfit? It's a little plain for an Ellison, but I suppose it suits you. Words like that, wrapped in sweetness, left deeper bruises than any raised voice ever could. And Leonard? He became quieter, more distant. When Celeste spoke, he listened. When Mira cried, he turned away. Mira learned to stop expecting anything from him. Not defense, not attention, not love. But she didn't give Celeste the satisfaction of breaking her. If her stepmother criticized her clothes, she wore something even louder. If she was told she was too visible, she made herself impossible to ignore. On the outside, she played the part of the strong, sarcastic daughter, unfazed by the cold. But inside, the loneliness ran deep. She didn't feel like a daughter in her own house, just an unwelcome reminder of someone else's story. And now the walls were crumbling. Ellison and Company, the company Leonard built over decades, was on the verge of collapse. Debt, disappearing clients, investor panic, a legacy breaking apart. Mira had never cared much about the business world, but lately, even she couldn't pretend not to notice the tension creeping into every corner of the house. The empire was falling, and she was starting to wonder if maybe it wasn't just the company that needed saving. The arguments had been growing louder each day. Behind closed doors, Leonard Ellison looked more worn down than ever, while Celeste's voice carried a sharp edge of panic, barely hidden beneath her composure. And then, on a day when thunder roared over Graybridge and rain struck the windows like warning drums, Mira was summoned to the drawing room. Her steps down the staircase were slow, deliberate. She could feel it. Something was deeply wrong. Celeste sat with her legs crossed, an expression carved from frost. Leonard looked hollow, like someone whose spirit had quietly left long ago. "Mira," Celeste said sweetly, though her tone rang with threat. "Sit down." Mira remained standing. "What is this?" Celeste exhaled, as if preparing to speak to someone fragile. "Ellison and Company is on the edge. We need a solution. You're going to marry Silas Vane." The name hit her like a slap. Her breath caught. The elegant, high-ceilinged room suddenly felt like a cage. Silas Vane. A name she'd only heard in whispers and news headlines. CEO of Vane Holdings. A billionaire, powerful, strategic, and terrifyingly cold. He was infamous for his belief that emotions had no place in negotiations, that love was a liability, that loyalty belonged only to profit. This wasn't a marriage. It was a merger. No, Mira said, her voice rising as she stepped back, her fists clenched, jaw trembling. You don't get to barter me like a pawn. I'm not your bargaining chip. Celeste chuckled, slow and mocking. Oh, Mira, let's not pretend you have a say. Without Silas, your father loses everything. Mira turned to Leonard, the man who once made her pancakes on Sunday mornings. Dad, she whispered. You're not really letting them do this to me, are you? But he didn't speak, didn't even look at her, just sat there, head bowed, as if his silence could soften the betrayal. Her chest tightened, with a pain she hadn't known she could still feel. Celeste leaned back, calm as ever. You know what happens if you say no. The company falls. Your father loses his legacy, and you, well, you'll carry the guilt. She knew exactly where to strike, because Mira wasn't heartless. Bitter, yes, angry often, but beneath it all, she still cared, and Celeste knew it. Mira's expression shifted. Not tears, not surrender, but ice. Wonderful, she said bitterly. A father who sells his daughter, a stepmother who plays puppet master. I'll marry your perfect little robot. But don't expect me to play the part. 3 days later, Mira stood outside one of Graybridge's most exclusive hotels. She was led up to the penthouse suite, gold trim, marble floors, a view that seemed to float above the city, and waiting inside, seated on a black leather sofa like a monarch awaiting an audience, was Silas Vane. The man was every bit the legend. Flawless suit, unreadable expression, eyes the color of frozen steel, untouched by warmth. He didn't stand, didn't smile, just studied her. And in that quiet, charged moment, Mira Ellison realized she wasn't being asked to marry a man. She was being offered to a machine carved from ice and power. He stood by the window, the skyline of Graybridge glinting behind him like a battlefield of glass and steel. Silas Vane wore a suit so precisely tailored it might as well have been a second skin. Not a wrinkle, not a flaw, just like the man himself. Mira smirked, slicing through the icy silence. Good evening, Mr. Vane, she said, voice light with defiance, also known as your reluctant bride. Silas didn't flinch. He simply turned to look at her, his gaze sharp enough to cut through flesh. Cold, calculating, as if he were already dissecting her. I don't care who you are, he said finally. This is a business transaction, nothing more. His voice was deep, devoid of warmth. Not rude, just void, like the sound of a door closing quietly, but permanently. We lived together for 1 year. After that, divorce. No emotional interference, no drama, no pretending. Mira felt the weight of his words settle in her chest like ice. He was exactly what they'd said, a machine in a man's body. Silas reached into a briefcase and placed a thick contract before her. Read it. If you agree, sign. She flipped through the pages, scanning clause after clause, no interference in personal lives, no emotional obligation, no public scenes, contract duration, 5 years, divorce permitted after term. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Do you really think feelings obey paperwork? Silas remained still. His eyes didn't waver. I don't need to control emotions, he replied, because I will never feel them for you. Mira placed a dramatic hand over her chest, feigning heartbreak. Oh no, she gasped theatrically. My poor heart shattered already. Silas didn't so much as blink. She sighed, picked up the pen, and signed her name with deliberate flair. All right, Mr. Vane, I'll play your little game, but I play by my own rules. The wedding was a performance. Held at one of Graybridge's most lavish hotels, the ceremony was crawling with photographers and high society guests. Mira wore white, but felt nothing. Silas stood beside her straight, stiff, soulless. Just another business deal. Do you, Silas Vane, take Mira Ellison as your wife? I do, he said flatly. Mira raised an eyebrow. Well, I suppose I do too. Silas shot her a warning look. She smiled wider. That night. The door to Silas's penthouse clicked shut behind her. The flashing lights of the paparazzi vanished. In their place, silence. The space was expansive glass, steel, minimalism everywhere. It smelled like new leather and absence. No champagne, no roses, no warmth. It was everything Mira expected from Silas. Perfect and completely hollow. She turned in place, slowly absorbing her new home. Well, Mr. Vane, she said, folding her arms, it's our wedding night. Shouldn't you at least pretend to treat your wife properly? Silas loosened his tie without looking at her. What exactly are you expecting? His voice was low, precise, like a scalpel. Oh, I don't know, she replied breezily. A glass of wine? A conversation? Maybe a little affection? He let out a soft, dry laugh. It carried no amusement. You're wasting both our time. He placed his drink down, then stepped toward her, calm, deliberate, intimidating. Let's not pretend this is a marriage. You know it isn't. I won't lie to you. Don't insult us both by lying to yourself. Mira tilted her head, watching him with a spark in her eyes. Are you always like this? Cold, calculated, completely immune to fun? Silas didn't answer. He didn't have to. Silas removed his watch with the same precision he applied to everything methodical, clean, detached. He placed it gently on the bar. His indifference grated on Mira like sandpaper on skin. This was their wedding night, and he acted as though he were preparing a quarterly report. No emotion, no spark, not even basic acknowledgement. She might as well have been part of the furniture. And Mira Ellison was not built to be invisible. She narrowed her eyes. Tell me something, Mr. Vane, she said, stepping closer, arms folded. Do you even know what a wedding night is supposed to be? Silas slid his hands into his pockets. His expression didn't shift. I don't care. Her lips curved upward, slow and sly. Without warning, she plucked his discarded tie from the bar, letting the silk slip around her fingers. Really? She mused. I would have thought a man with your reputation might be at least curious about the woman he just married. Still, he didn't move. His icy eyes locked on hers, cold, unreadable. I have no interest in you. Her smile widened. Then I suppose I'll have to give you a reason to change your mind. With a swift motion, she looped the tie around his neck and gave it a gentle tug, closing the distance between them like a move on a chessboard. Silas stilled. His gray eyes darkened slightly, just enough to notice. Something flickered behind them. Danger. Interest. Maybe both. Mira didn't flinch. She held his gaze, fearless, teasing. Tell me, Mr. Vane. Her voice dropped, silken and low. Did you actually read the contract? His jaw clenched. But he didn't move, didn't pull away. Every word, she tilted her head. Then surely you remember Clause 1. A pause. His muscles tensed. It was subtle, but it was the first crack in his armor that night. We don't interfere in each other's private lives, he said finally, voice tight. Mira let the tie slip from her fingers, like a ribbon falling away. She stepped back with a glint in her eyes. Exactly, she whispered. So tell me, Silas, what counts as interference? He stared at her in silence. This was new. No one dared challenge him. No one invaded his space uninvited, and certainly not with a smirk on their lips and amusement in their eyes. But Mira wasn't afraid. She wasn't trying to win him over. She was enjoying the game, and he didn't know how to respond to that. She sighed dramatically, then sauntered toward their bed, and flopped down as if it had always been hers. Relax. I'll behave, she said with a yawn. For tonight. She stretched out like a cat in sunlight, completely at ease in his territory. Silas watched her in silence for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned toward the guest room. I'll be sleeping next door. Mira propped herself up on one elbow, grinning. Good night, darling. He paused, just for a second, then kept walking. The door clicked shut behind him. Mira lay back and closed her eyes, a quiet smile still playing on her lips. He had tried to treat her like a formality, but tonight, Silas Vane had noticed her, and that was only the beginning. If Silas Vane refused to play, Mira Ellison would simply make it impossible for him to ignore the game. And it began that very night. Night 2. Silas stepped out of the bathroom, steam trailing faintly behind him. He wore a simple black sleep set, sleeves rolled just enough to show his forearms. He was ready for rest. But when he reached his bedroom, he stopped cold. There, sprawled comfortably across his bed, was Mira. Not in the guest room, not waiting to talk, just lying there like she owned it. He narrowed his eyes, the muscles in his jaw flexing. What are you doing in my bed? Mira propped her chin on her palm, batting her lashes innocently. Violating any clause? I don't recall a line in the contract that says I can't sleep here. Silas's expression iced over. Get out. Nope. She rolled onto her side, resting her cheek against her hand, gaze never leaving him. He felt a wave of irritation start to rise. What are you staring at? Just trying to figure something out, she replied casually. Are you actually human or just a walking algorithm for power and profit? Silas exhaled slowly, a man barely holding on to patience. You're testing me. Am I passing? Mira grinned, shameless. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. Silas snapped. With one fluid motion, he grabbed the edge of the blanket, scooped her up, and dumped her onto the next bed with zero ceremony. Sleep. In your own damn room, Mira landed with a laugh, adjusting her pillow with exaggerated care. You're never going to survive a year with me, Silas Vane. He didn't respond. He just slammed the door on the way out. But that night, something unfamiliar stirred in his chest, and it followed him all the way to sleep. Night 3. Mira raised the stakes. This time, Silas walked into his room and stopped mid-step. She was there again, but this time wrapped in a blanket, wearing fluffy white bunny pajamas, complete with floppy ears. In her lap, a giant bag of popcorn. On the bed, her iPad playing a classic romantic comedy. She waved without looking away. Evening. Want to join? It's the part where the brooding guy realizes he actually has feelings. Silas's eye twitched. You're eating in my bed. Mira tossed a kernel into her mouth, crunching loudly, and yet still not violating the contract. His hands clenched at his sides. Get out of my bed. Make me. She grinned, fully enjoying herself. Silas stepped forward, yanked the popcorn from her hands, and hurled it into the nearby trash bin. But she just laughed. Mr. Vane, you're way too easy to provoke. He glared, then walked out. Again. The next morning, Silas emerged from his study, coffee in hand, tie already half done, and froze. Mira was casually strolling through the penthouse, barefoot, coffee in one hand, wearing his white dress shirt. Only a few buttons were fastened. Her long legs disappeared beneath the fabric, and her expression was completely relaxed. She sipped from her mug, raised an eyebrow. Morning. Silas set his mug down with deliberate slowness. What are you wearing? She looked down, then back up. Your shirt. Don't worry, I picked the least expensive one. Silas inhaled through his nose, a dangerous calm settling in. Silas took a sharp step toward her. "You're not allowed to touch my things." Mira tilted her head, the edge of a grin tugging at her lips. "Oh? And what exactly are you going to do about it?" Silas stiffened. She was right. The contract never said she couldn't wear his clothes. His jaw clenched as he turned away, but not before his eyes involuntarily flicked back to her, but drowning in his crisp white shirt, the hem brushing her bare thighs. There was something dangerous about this woman, and it had nothing to do with rules. Mira smirked as she watched him try and fail to hide the way she unsettled him. Another round won. That night, the teasing stopped. Mira curled up in bed, her arms wrapped around her stomach, her face pale and lips trembling. She had pushed her body too far too much coffee, too many late-night snacks, and a constant hum of stress from a marriage that felt more like a chess match than a relationship. At first, she thought it would pass, but the pain only grew. She tried to stand, to make her way to the kitchen for warm water, but the moment her feet touched the ground, dizziness slammed into her like a wave. The room spun. Then crash. A loud thud echoed through the penthouse as she collapsed, knocking a glass from the nightstand. Seconds later, her bedroom door burst open. Silas stood at the doorway, tension carved into his features. He scanned the scene, Mira crumpled on the floor, her hand clutching her stomach, pain twisting her expression. Mira. His voice was low, and to his surprise, edged with concern he didn't even know he felt. She looked up weakly, forcing a crooked smile. "It's fine. Just a stomachache." But the moment she tried to rise, another surge of pain seized her. Her breath hitched, body trembling. Silas moved instantly. One arm supported her back, the other grasped her arm firmly. She was smaller than he expected, fragile even. He hated how that realization settled in his chest. "Stop moving. Sit down." She didn't argue. She couldn't. He guided her back to bed gently, but with quiet command, then pulled out his phone. "Get here." "New," he barked to his private physician. "She's in pain." 15 minutes later. The doctor arrived, examined her carefully, and finally gave the diagnosis. Acute gastritis, likely stress-induced. Poor eating, high anxiety. She needs medication, rest, and less pressure. Silas nodded once, but his eyes never left her. Stress? The woman who smirked, teased, and played constant mind games. He didn't understand it, but it unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Once the doctor left, Silas remained at her bedside. Without a word, he reached forward and pulled the blanket gently over her. Mira stirred, her lashes fluttering, her voice weak but still teasing. "Are you worried about me, Mr. Vane?" Silas didn't answer right away. He met her eyes, and for once, they weren't locked in a battle. Just quiet, still, real. "Go to sleep," he murmured. Mira's smile was faint, and this time, not sarcastic. "Maybe you're not as cold as I thought." Something changed that night. Silas couldn't name it, but from that moment on, he could no longer ignore her. Every time he passed the living room and saw her sprawled across the couch, pretending to read but secretly watching him, something stirred. Every time she brushed past him in the kitchen, coffee in hand, lips slightly parted, his gaze lingered a second longer than it should, and no matter how hard he tried to bury it, he couldn't shake the feeling that Mira Ellison was no longer just a contract. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. Mira Ellison didn't fear Silas Vane. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't need his approval. Instead, she challenged him. Unpredictable, unfiltered, untamed, and Silas hated things he couldn't control. He had always lived with precision: his work, his wealth, his time, even his emotions, all carefully arranged like pieces on a chessboard. But Mira? She didn't fit on the board. She moved in spirals, spoke in riddles, broke rules he hadn't even written down yet. And for the first time in his life, instead of wanting to push someone away, he wanted to understand her. Mira could feel it. The way his eyes lingered a fraction too long. The way his silence wasn't quite as distant as before. So she decided it was time to raise the stakes. One morning, while Silas sat at his desk reviewing a contract with his usual cold focus, Mira walked in quietly. She didn't knock. She simply placed her hands on the edge of his desk and leaned forward, eyes locking onto his. Silas looked up. Deadpan. What do you want now? Mira shrugged, her smile sly. Nothing. Just... I've noticed you've been looking at me more than usual. He blinked barely, but enough for her to see it. You're imagining things. Am I? She batted her lashes, exaggerated, teasing, and leaned in just a little closer. Her perfume was soft, subtle, disarming. Silas met her gaze, and for a moment, just one heartbeat, he forgot to breathe. Mira straightened with a soft laugh. Relax, Mr. Vane. I won't break the contract. She turned and walked away, and Silas found himself watching her go unwillingly, uncontrollably. And for the first time, he wondered if he could actually stick to his own rules. He had designed the marriage to be simple. No emotions, no interference, no complications. But Mira Ellison had apparently skipped that part of the agreement. She was everywhere. In his kitchen, humming to herself. In his living room, dancing barefoot to old vinyl records. In his head, when she shouldn't have been. She was a storm inside his fortress, and he had no umbrella. 3:00 a.m., madness. His alarm blared unexpectedly. Silas groaned, reaching to silence it. Then Silas, a voice. Too close. Silas. He opened one eye. Mira was sitting cross-legged on his bed, fully awake, staring at him like a question he didn't know how to answer. What do you think about marriage? Silas blinked. What the hell are you doing? Answer the question. You woke me up at 3 a.m. To talk about marriage? Mira nodded, entirely unfazed. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Do you have any idea how important my meeting is in the morning? Of course. Then why in God's name are you doing this? She tilted her head, smiling slowly. Because I wanted to see if I could make you lose your temper. Silas stared. Then without a word, he yanked the blanket over his head. Turn off the lights, go to sleep. Mira grinned as she slid off the bed. You're so boring, Mr. Vane. He didn't respond. But sleep didn't come as easily after that. Silas Vane was changing. He tried to ignore her, but with each passing day, Mira became harder and harder to forget. It was impossible. No matter where he went, no matter what he did, Mira Ellison was always there in his thoughts, in his silence, in the spaces she hadn't even entered. When she wasn't around, the penthouse felt unnervingly quiet. When she was, he couldn't stop watching her. And no matter how many times Silas Vane reminded himself that this was just a contract, just a game, he knew. She had broken every rule he'd built to protect himself. One evening, as he walked past her study, he overheard her voice, firm, sharp but trembling slightly beneath its strength. She was on the phone, clearly arguing with someone. Silas paused. He didn't know why it unsettled him, but it did. Before he could think better of it, he spoke. Who's giving you trouble? Mira froze mid-sentence. She turned, surprised. His tone wasn't angry, it was low, direct, protective. I asked, he said again, who's giving you trouble? She raised a brow, then gave a small, dry laugh. Mr. Vane? Are you worried about me? He didn't answer. Instead, he picked up his phone. Send me the details. 1 hour later, the problem was gone. Quietly. Completely. That night, Mira looked at him differently. Not as an opponent, not as a machine. Maybe Silas Vane wasn't as cold as she'd always believed. But even games have to pause when grief enters the room. She never imagined it would happen this way. The call came on a rainy Wednesday. The sky was a dull gray, matching the dullness in her chest as she flipped through a file at the office. Her phone buzzed. She picked up, her voice as calm and collected as ever. "Hello?" But the voice on the other end wasn't familiar. It was clinical, detached, laced with sympathy. "Is this Mira Ellison?" "Yes, speaking. I'm sorry to inform you. Your father, Mr. Leonard Ellison, passed away this morning from a sudden heart attack. He was taken to St. Branton's, but did not survive." The words hit her like bricks. She couldn't breathe. "No, I'm very sorry." The phone slipped from her hand and landed on the desk with a dull thud. Her world, already fragile, collapsed completely. He hadn't been the best father. He hadn't even been a good one. But he was still her father, and now he was gone. The only family she had. The last person who ever called her his. A gaping hollow swallowed her whole. 3 days later, the funeral was held under a gray sky, drizzle soaking through Mira's black dress like a second skin. But she felt nothing. She stood motionless, watching the coffin being lowered into the ground. Beside her, Silas stood silent, steady. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't speak. He was just there. Across the cemetery, Celeste Ellison stood at a polite distance. Her expression composed the perfect portrait of public grief. But Mira didn't care. There was no more room for bitterness, only absence. Her father had never protected her, never chosen her. But even with all his silence, he had been a tether. Now that tether was gone, and with it, so was her last tie to belonging. No one left to call family, no one to need her, no one to lean on. She was utterly, unshakably alone. When the funeral ended, Mira returned to the penthouse in a fog. She didn't remove her coat. She didn't say a word to Silas. She walked straight past him and disappeared into the silence of the living room. Her eyes were blank, staring ahead, not at anything in particular, just into the kind of emptiness that swallowed sound and thought alike. "Mira." Ellison sank into the corner of the couch, folding herself inward, arms wrapped tight around her own body, as if trying to hold on to a warmth that no longer existed. But she didn't cry, not a single tear. Instead, silence. An eerie, suffocating stillness that felt heavier than any sob could ever be. Silas stood by the doorway, unmoving. He watched her from a distance. The Mira he had come to know, sharp-tongued, unbothered, fiery, was gone. What sat before him now was someone else entirely, someone hollow, someone drowning in a grief so profound it seemed to drain the color from the room. No sarcasm, no mischief, no light. And something inside him shifted, a sharp, strange pang he didn't have a name for. He wanted to move, to say something, anything. But he didn't know how. Silas Vane had never comforted anyone before. He didn't know how to reach someone who had nothing left to hold on to. So he stood there, silent, helpless. 3 days later, Mira thought she had seen the worst life could offer. But Celeste Ellison had other plans. She arrived dressed in tailored black, but her expression was steel, not sorrow. The grieving widow mask was gone, in its place a viper. "Leonard is gone," Celeste said calmly. "And as of today, Ellison and Comey belongs to me." Mira clenched her fists. "You have no right. That company was my father's." Celeste tilted her head, the corner of her mouth curling with fake sympathy. "Oh, Mira, did you really believe he left you anything?" She pulled out a thick folder and dropped it on the desk with a thud. Your father signed the transfer of inheritance long before his death. I now control everything. Mira's breath caught. With shaking hands, she opened the documents, praying for some mistake. But there it was, her father's signature. She staggered back. Cold spread through her limbs like poison. Everything he had built now in the hands of the woman who had hated her. And as if that weren't enough, Celeste leaned forward, voice syrupy and cruel. If you behave, I might let you keep a symbolic share. A little token, so you can pretend you still matter. Mira bit her lip so hard it nearly bled. I won't let you get away with this. Oh? Celeste said smoothly. And who exactly is going to help you? Silence. Then the knife twisted. Silas? She asked sweetly. Didn't he tell you? He and I have already spoken. Mira's heart stopped. If he agrees to collaborate with me, Vane Holdings gets a large stake in Ellison & Co. A mutually beneficial deal. Very tidy. The ground dropped from beneath her. She stared at the paper Celeste pushed across the desk and saw his name. Silas Vane. Had he betrayed her? She didn't wait. Storming out of the office, Mira went straight to the penthouse. Straight to him. She found him where he always went when he didn't want to be found, on the balcony, gazing out over the city skyline like a man carved from stone. The wind caught her coat, but she didn't flinch. Silas. He turned slowly, his face unreadable. But Mira wasn't looking for expressions. She was looking for truth. Tell me it's not true. Silas stood frozen, eyes lost in thought as he stared out at the skyline. But when he saw her, something in his chest tightened. Mira, her voice trembled. You did it, didn't you? His gaze flickered. The hesitation was sharp. It cut through her. You really made a deal with her? It wasn't the words, but the pause between them that sliced deeper than any betrayal she had ever known. He didn't deny it immediately. And that hesitation, it felt like a blade. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Just another business transaction? Mira's laugh was bitter, the edge of it laced with unshed tears. Silas's jaw tightened. After what felt like eternity, he exhaled deeply. And then, for the first time, he spoke with absolute sincerity. I don't care about the company, Mira. I care about you. Mira froze. Her heart stuttered in her chest. His words were honest, even raw, but they didn't feel like enough. I can't trust you anymore. She turned and walked away. Every step was a struggle, each one pushing her further from him. But deep down, a small part of her wanted to turn around, to run into his arms, to believe the words he had spoken. But Mira knew better. She had lost everything. Her father, her company, and the man she thought she could trust. Silas had betrayed her too. That night she cried. She curled up on the sofa, blankly staring out the window, feeling the weight of her heartbreak suffocating her. She didn't know what to do, but deep inside, something was rising, a fire, a fierce will to fight back. She would not let Celeste Ellison win so easily. She had to fight, and she had to do it alone. The next morning, Mira left the penthouse and began her battle to reclaim what was hers. But the truth, a bitter pill, hit her hard. Celeste had planned everything. She controlled the board. She held the majority of the shares. Even the inheritance contract was rigged in her favor. Mira had nothing left. Nothing but a small, insignificant stake. She was alone. Or so she thought. That evening, exhausted, frustrated, Mira returned to the penthouse. When she stepped inside, she was met with a surprise. Silas was waiting for her, standing by the living room. Her guard went up immediately. What do you want? He stood, his storm-gray eyes never leaving hers. To help you take back the company. Her breath caught in her throat. You're joking. You're working with Vivian? Silas sighed, his patience thinning, but still present. I was never on her side. I only pretended to cooperate to find a way to take back control. Mira's fist clenched, her heart filled with doubt. Why should I believe you? He didn't answer right away. He simply stepped closer, his voice low, steady. Because I can't watch you be destroyed. Mira froze. Her heart skipped a beat, but she hadn't forgotten the pain he'd caused her. The betrayal, the silence, the hurt. If I agree to work with you, she whispered, I make the rules. Silas's expression didn't change. He just shrugged, as if everything she said was part of the deal. That's fine. Mira narrowed her eyes, watching for any sign of deception. After a long moment, she nodded. Good. Then let's take down Celeste Ellison. The plan was set. Step 1, uncover the truth. Silas used his connections to hire the best lawyers to re-examine Henry Carter's inheritance contract. They suspected forgery, and they were right. Step 2, divide and conquer. Mira met with the shareholders in secret, pointing out Vivian's questionable management decisions. Slowly, support for Celeste began to wane. Step 3. The final blow. The next board meeting would be their battleground. The day of reckoning. The boardroom was filled. Tension hung in the air. The boardroom was packed top executives, major investors, and legal observers. The tension in the air was almost tangible. Then the doors opened, and Mira Ellison walked in. Gone was the woman broken by grief. In her place stood someone sharpened by loss, strengthened by fire, a force no one could ignore. She moved with icy precision, her expression unreadable. Silas followed, taking the seat beside her, his presence calm, but unmistakably protective. His gaze was a silent warning to anyone who dared oppose her. Celeste Ellison sat at the head of the table, smug and composed until her eyes met Mira's. For the first time, her mask cracked. The meeting began. Celeste wasted no time trying to reassert her control. Her voice was smooth, confident, but Mira didn't flinch. Instead, she stood. And with calm, unshakable poise, she laid her evidence on the table. Documents, testimonies, proof. Celeste had forged the inheritance documents. The room erupted in gasps, whispers flying from one side of the table to the other, and then Silas rose. He handed over a second file, this one detailing Celeste's financial manipulation and illegal backdoor deals. His voice was low, factual, devastating. By the end of the meeting, the boardroom had turned. One by one, the members voted. Celeste Ellison was stripped of all executive authority, effective immediately, and Mira Ellison was reinstated as the rightful heir and acting chair of Ellison and Como. Celeste went pale. Her voice caught in her throat as she stared at Mira, hatred burning in her eyes. But Mira didn't blink. You took too much from me, she said, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. Now it's your turn to lose. Celeste had no choice. With her empire crumbling around her, she turned and walked away. Mira didn't watch her go. She had already won. That night, Mira stood alone on the balcony. The city below glowed with neon light, so full of life, it almost felt cruel. The wind tugged at her dress, her hair, but she didn't move. She had her company back, her father's legacy, justice. And yet, the ache in her chest remained. A quiet step sounded behind her. She didn't need to look. Silas. He stood beside her in silence, close enough to be felt, far enough to give her space. She inhaled slowly, then spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. He turned his head slightly. For what? For helping me take back the company. I don't know how to repay you. She looked at him, truly looked for the first time in weeks. Her eyes were clear, but not unbroken. Silas didn't answer immediately. He studied her, as if trying to memorize the lines of someone he feared forgetting. Then his voice came quieter than she'd ever heard it. You don't need to thank me. I was just doing my duty as your husband. Mira blinked. Her breath caught, just slightly, but then she pulled herself together. Right. She turned away, her expression slipping back into that familiar, quiet sadness. Silas hated it. He missed her smirk, her fire, the spark that turned every room into a battlefield of wit and charm. I want you to be the way you were, he said suddenly. Wild, difficult, impossible. Mira's lips twitched, almost a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Instead, she leaned on the railing and let the silence settle. And then, without warning, she spoke. A truth no one had ever heard. You know, I once had a happy family. Silas said nothing. He listened. My mother was everything, warm, gentle. She used to call me her little princess. She made me feel like I mattered. Her voice grew softer, but then she died. Too early, and all the light went out of that house. Silas's expression darkened. Mira gave a bitter laugh. And my father, well, he loved his work more than he ever loved me. Mira's voice was quiet. He was my father, but I always felt like a shadow in his life. And when Celeste moved in, I knew. I no longer had a place in his heart. She turned slightly toward Silas, her eyes shimmering, not with tears, but with something far heavier. But I refuse to be sad. If I have to live, I won't live quietly. Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile. I can't change what I've lost, but I can choose how I embrace what remains. Silas didn't speak, but inside him, something cracked. For the first time, he truly saw Mira Ellison. She wasn't just bold and defiant. She wasn't just playful and wild. She was someone who had lost so much, yet still smiled, still stood tall, still chose joy, even in a world that had taken everything from her. She was a storm, a force of nature. And for the first time in his carefully measured life, he felt completely powerless. She had taught him a world beyond structure, beyond contracts, beyond control. A world of freedom, of chaos, of feeling. And now, when her fire flickered low, he didn't want to stand by. He wanted to hold her, to protect her, to stay. But he didn't have the words for any of that. So instead, Silas did the only thing he could. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. Mira froze for a moment, stunned. Then slowly, tentatively, she let herself lean into him, into his warmth, into the safety she didn't realize she needed. She closed her eyes, her breath catching, and for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel alone. Silas's voice was soft against her hair. You don't have to be strong all the time. Mira didn't answer. She just nodded. And in that moment, though neither said the words aloud, everything had changed. This was no longer a contract, no longer strangers playing a game. This was the beginning of something real. Later that week, Mira strolled into the living room, cradling a warm cup of coffee. She dropped onto the couch, stretching her legs out with a content sigh. For once, there was peace, but peace and Silas Vane rarely coexisted. He appeared in front of her, expression serious. Too serious. Mira narrowed her eyes. What now, Mervane? He didn't speak. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket, a familiar stack of papers. The marriage contract. Mira blinked, raising an eyebrow. Don't tell me you're revising the terms again, adding a no popcorn in bed clause. Still, he said nothing. From his other pocket, he pulled a lighter. Wait, before she could stop him, the flame caught the corner of the contract. The edges curled, blackened, and disintegrated. In seconds, the contract was gone. Ashes! Mira sat up, stunned. What the hell did you just do? Silas dropped the ashes into the trash and dusted off his hands. Then he looked at her, voice deep, steady. I don't want a marriage with conditions anymore. Mira stared, her coffee forgotten, her lips parted. Then what do you want? He held her gaze, and slowly, without a word, Silas reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Mira's heart skipped. She knew exactly what that meant. But instead of tearing up like a movie heroine, she crossed her arms, tilted her head, and smirked. Let me guess. You planned this whole dramatic moment, didn't you? Thought burning the contract would make me cry and fall into your arms? Silas arched an eyebrow. But a rare smile touched the corner of his lips. Then, without a word, he knelt down, flipping open the box. Inside, a simple, yet stunning ring sparkled in the low light. Mira Ellison. His voice was deep, steady, and softer than she'd ever heard it. The first time I married you, it was because of a contract. She chuckled, but this time it wasn't sarcastic. But this time, he continued, I'm asking you to marry me, because I can't imagine a life without you. For once, Mira was speechless. No comebacks, no teasing, just her and him, the man who had fought beside her, listened to her, chosen her. She glanced at the ring, then back at him, and realized her heart had already been his long before either of them had noticed. She shrugged, pretending to hesitate. Tough call. You are incredibly serious after all. Silas didn't flinch. He just waited. Mira laughed and suddenly snatched the box from his hand. All right, Mr. Vane, I'll accept. Silas let out a relieved chuckle, reaching for her hand. But she stepped back, raising a finger. Wait. One condition, he groaned. What now? Mira batted her lashes, grinning wickedly. If I marry you, I get unlimited rights to cause chaos. And you're not allowed to complain. Silas sighed in defeat, then gently took her hand, slipping the ring onto her finger. His voice was warm, firm, and filled with everything he couldn't say. Fine, but just know now that you're officially my wife. I'm never letting you go. Mira laughed, her eyes sparkling. Who said you'd never fall for me? Silas smirked, then pulled her in for a deep, certain kiss. No contracts, no conditions, just love. Their second wedding was nothing like the first. Held in a sunlit garden surrounded by white roses and gentle music, Mira walked the aisle in a simple, elegant gown, her face glowing with real joy. At the altar stood Silas, no longer a cold, calculated businessman. He wasn't waiting as part of a deal. He was waiting for the love of his life. Silas Vane, the officiant asked, do you take Mira Ellison to be your wife? To love and cherish for all your days. I do, he replied without hesitation. Then the question turned to her. Mira smiled, her eyes locked on his. I do. Just as the officiant raised his voice to pronounce them husband and wife, Mira leaned close. So this means you can't stop me from causing trouble anymore, right? Silas narrowed his eyes, but before he could answer, she planted a loud, playful kiss on his cheek. The crowd burst into laughter. Silas sighed, but there was nothing in his gaze but love. As long as you stay by my side, he whispered, you can cause as much chaos as you want. And with that, they sealed their vows not with a signature, but with a real kiss. Mira had lost a mother. She had been neglected by a father. She had been betrayed, dismissed, and almost erased. But she had never let those losses define her. She chose to live boldly, wildly, joyfully, to fight, to love. And Silas? He had once believed in control over everything, but through her, he learned. The greatest power isn't control, it's choosing to love someone exactly as they are. Thank you for walking with us through Mira and Silas's journey. What moment touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience, love, and second chances. See you in the next story.